I'll go ahead and introduce myself first. My name is Jocelyn King. I'm the CEO and founder of Virgil HR. For those of you who don't know, Virgil HR is an HR compliance suite that helps HR stay compliant with core HR compliance needs, whether it's staying compliant with leave or termination or reasonable accommodations or pay changes that occur, employee classification audits, worker classification audits. We can help with all of that in a really automated way by offering you a software that analyzes and automates the whole process for you. So rather than you going out and researching what are the maternity leave requirements in California and going down a rabbit hole for a couple hours on Google, you can instead use our smart chatbot and it will analyze those laws for you and tell you exactly what you need to do to stay compliant. So what might have taken a couple hours of work now takes a couple minutes with our software. Among the many things that we offer is an employee handbook builder. So we are really excited to show you some of the features and functionalities of that tool later on in the webinar today. And I have my colleague Sarah joining us here to assist with that. Before I hand it off to Christine for an introduction, we do have a Q&A at the end. The Q&A will be both for anything related to questions about handbooks and handbook creation and best practices to questions about our tool. I'd ask that you please use the Q&A section of Zoom, and we will go through those at the very end. At the end, we will also include the SHRM PDC code for 1 hour of credit, so be on the lookout for that as well. Without further ado, I'll pass it off to you, Christine. Thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thanks, Jocelyn. Thanks to everybody that's joining. And Sarah, thanks as well for joining today's program and inviting me to join. So those of you that don't know me, again, my name's Christine Walters. I am excited to be here this afternoon. I'm just going to touch on a few things with Jocelyn's help at the beginning. And I also want to share, I guess, with regard to Virgil HR, I believe in the program so much. I've known Jocelyn for a number of years, and I am both an advisory board member to Virgil HR as well as an equity partner. So I know there are a lot of tools out there. This is a cool tool along with others. And I'm excited, one, to go through the demo myself with you all and for you all to see it under Sarah's guidance. So I'll turn it back over to Jocelyn and follow her lead.
All right, thank you so much. All right, so we're going to get started and first talk about the top 10 handbook best practices. Christine, being a guru on all things handbooks, I'd asked and she kindly agreed to put together a set of best practices that she felt was really practical for every HR practitioner to have under their tool belt. So, very first one was, when should we as an organization have a handbook? What do you think, Christine?
And so, common questions that I've gotten over the years. And also, I think we want to say this program does not constitute the running of legal advice. The answer is so fact specific based on your geography and your industry and so many factors. My general answer is I think when you are approaching or hit the 15 employee threshold, I think if you don't have a handbook by then, that's probably a really good time to start thinking about it. Why? Because, as you all know, we have Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, Americans with Disabilities Act. We have a lot of federal employment laws that kick in when you have your 15th employee. There are a lot that are already in effect. Fair Labor Standards Act, OSHA record keeping requirements, state and local requirements. So before you hit your 15th isn't a bad idea, but I would say around your 15th employee, generally for private sector employers.
Thank you. And thank you for reminding me. Yes, we have an attorney in the house. So just as a disclaimer, none of this constitutes legal advice. It's all informational. So if you have any specific questions, we recommend, speaking to your attorney, of course. But thank you. All right. And this is a question that comes up a lot. Christine, I've seen some handbooks be 200 or 300 pages long, and then others that are pretty sparse in nature as well, although I would actually find that to be far and few between. Usually they're on the longer side. How long should a handbook be?
Yeah, again, general guide, I think to myself, do I really think that my employee, even if I, oh yeah, I'll sign the acknowledgement of receipt, I read it, do you think they really did? And so I kind of like 30, 35 pages, I think is a reasonable 25, not bad. But I agree, Jocelyn. I see a lot that are 50, 80, 90, 100 or more. And I just question whether employees are actually reading the whole thing. So there's no bright line. I think thinking about what you have to have, what you, I don't like the word should. I try to avoid that. What you could have because it's good and proactive. And then what are some of the nice to haves? And if you can carve out those three categories, at least cover kind of the must haves, I think you can have a much shorter handbook.
Yeah, I think this gets really tricky because, are you saying it should be 25 or 30 for that general part of the handbook, plus you have your state addenda? Or how does somebody manage the state portion? Because that can get quite lengthy.
Yeah, it can. And so, and I like your description because that's kind of how I recommend it too, is should we have a separate handbook for all our different states where we employ employees? I kind of like one handbook for everybody. That's the core handbook. And then there are exactly what you just said, addenda in the back that address state specific. So again, I think it's going to depend. I find the addenda don't have to be too long. I think a lot of it is going to refer the employee to HR.
Hmm.
You have your sick and safe leave policies. A lot of states and locals, jurisdictions mandate this is what the model has to look like, kind of thing. But other than those, I think generally you could have bullet points. Another, and it might be in here, forgive me, I don't recall if we talked about like policy versus procedure. I see a lot of those voluminous handbooks have a bunch of procedures in them. I think of the handbook as the what. This is what we offer and what we expect. When you get into that, well, how do I access that? How do I report it? How do I get mileage reimbursement? I think all those hows and the forms can go in a procedure manual. And I see a couple of questions have come in through Q&A. Do you want me to read those now or you want to do those at the end?
If you think they're specifically applicable to what we're talking about now, then I think that's great.
Sure. Are state-specific addenda needed for the state an employee lives in if it's different than their state of work? I have many employees, I don't want to give away the industry, many employees that work out of a particular state, but they live in a variety of states. So generally speaking, the policies like the state-specific addenda that you need should relate to where the employee works regardless of where they live. So if you have the corporate office, but you have folks coming in from all across the country, but they're working at that location, then you could include just that location. If they're working from home, generally it has to would include then that's their workspace, so it would include that state. Oh, somebody asked, I'm sorry if I missed this, will you send a copy of the slides?
No, we won't send a copy of the slides, but we will send a recording out to everybody who registered.
Excellent. And then one more. What are your thoughts on a hard copy paper handbook? I love these. I hear all these questions are good. What are your thoughts on a hard copy paper handbook versus an outward facing website that houses all company policy, etc.? So I think electronic distribution, if you can do that, is fabulous. The PDF, the employees can electronically acknowledge that they received it. I think it helps with the updates, that sort of thing. It's less expensive than the hard copy paper. On the flip side, if you have employees who work like out in the field, maybe field engineers, surveyors, construction, agriculture, where during their working hours, they really don't have access to the internet or your HR department. I don't want the answer to be, oh, well, they can look at the handbook at night or on the weekends. Mm-mm. During their working hours, if they're out in the field, for those folks, I would at least, I like giving them a paper or hard copy of the handbook, at least one for their department. And I prefer just one for each employee so that they can access it if and when they need it. And those were all the questions that came in so far.
I actually have a question about the length of the handbook again. Have you ever seen any type of litigation occur where an employee was successful in not having to be held accountable for something in the handbook because it was too long?
Ooh, that's a good one. Yes. Well, a qualified yes. Because the handbook was too long or the policy was too long. Either. So if the handbook's too long, then the argument becomes, well, you signed the acknowledgement of receipt, and the judge says, come on. Do you really think? I know they signed it, but who really thinks they read 100 pages? Have I actually seen that? I have not. But I don't want to be the test case because I think we all would all say, well, yeah, I don't think they actually read it either. What I have seen is there was just one I described in a webcast yesterday where the policy was like so long and convoluted that the judge said, you know what, this is so confusing. There's like how to report harassment, how to report whistleblowing, how to report, and every policy has different names, different, it's really confusing. And so employer you lose kind of thing. So to me, that goes to your question, concise, clear, and it doesn't have to be voluminous. You can always say, for more information, contact HR. But we're giving them the high points, the high bullets, so they understand who, what, where, when. And I like the why.
Mhm. I have seen some people do when they have really long handbooks is they will highlight summaries of the most important things that you should be aware of. Is that something you'd recommend?
Hmm, I haven't seen that. And so I always try to do pros and cons. So, yeah, my first thought was, oh, I like that. And then I thought, oops, wait a minute. If I know the key points are highlighted and I'm the employee, I'm might be inclined to just read the highlights and not the whole thing.
Mm.
Um, Here's another example there where we highlight things. I have seen at least one case where, and I see this in a lot of handbooks, like every third policy says if you violate the policy, you'll be subject to corrective action up to and including termination from employment. And it says that like on every page, every other page. One, it's kind of like, wow, that's hard. It's not warm and welcoming, kind of harsh. And I remember at least one case where the issue was employee, whether they got fired or written up for violating a policy that did not have that sentence in it. And the judge pointed out, you have that sentence in so many policies, it kind of looks like there must be a reason why you put it in so many, but you didn't put it in all of them. And
Mm.
so there's at least an inference that if it's in this policy and this policy, but not this one, and this is the one the employee violated, maybe they're not subject to discharge. So I kind of like putting in the introduction, the warm fuzzy, hi, this is who we are, what we do. This doesn't cover everything. If you're expected to follow our policies, if you don't, it may result in corrective action up to and including termination. Happy to have you with us, and then just go to the policies. I
Mm.
might still include that sentence in some where violation is really critical, like whistleblowing, retaliation, EEO, anti-harassment. You violate some of those things, then I might put that caveat in there. But it's a good question, and I went on a little too long there.
I know. That was awesome. Thank you. That was a great nugget. Okay, so there were two things in here. You have what must we include and what should we include?
So the must-haves, for example, and when I say must, is it legally required? A quasi, it's at least inferred. So our equal employment opportunity, anti-harassment, for the federal government. If you're a government contractor, you're going to have certain whistleblowing, pay transparency, or must-haves. For some industry specific, like OSHA, bloodborne pathogen, maybe for healthcare industry. So those are just some examples. When I say like the EEO anti-harassment, does the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, Title VII, any of those? I'm not aware that any of them say Private sector employers with 15 or more employees have to have that policy. Same with ADA, reasonable accommodation. You have to have a policy in the handbook if you have a handbook. FMLA does. FMLA is another must have. FMLA regulations say if you have a handbook, you must, and you're a covered employer, you must have the FMLA policy. For the others, I say must. In my experience, if an employee files, let's say, a charge of discrimination or a claim, something like that, one of the first questions the EEOC asks when they send out the charging document and they want that RFI, the request for information, I find very, very common. They want a copy of the policy, a copy of the handbook, the employee signed acknowledgement of receipt. They want the date that you did the training. They want a copy of the training materials. They want the sign-in sheet from the training. And so, oh, well, we don't have to have that. No, maybe you don't have to, but I don't want to lose points, or I want to score points by being able to say, look, we have a policy. We told the employees what their rights were. We did the training. Here's a signed acknowledgement of receipt, et cetera, et cetera. And then what should we include? Um, and the other must haves, if I didn't mention, like the state and local sick and safe leave laws, they're very popular. So this all depends on where we are. What state am I in, and what county or city am I in, and what laws do those jurisdictions have for what has to go in a handbook? And then what should we have? My answer to that, here's my tip. I would say for each of us, ask yourself this question. In the last 6 to 12 months, what have been your top 3 to 5 biggest frustrations? Like, I can't believe employees keep asking this question. Do they not know, like, how much vacation do I get? Or what's the dress code? Or whatever those FAQs are for your employees, that's what I think goes in the handbook. Anticipate their questions. Those are the should haves. Hey, welcome aboard. This is what we want you to know. This is what we frequently get asked. Here, certainly benefits, healthcare, welfare, pension, um, medical, and then paid and unpaid leave, all the benefits. I think that could go in. You know, all the stuff that that you want them to know and that they want to know. I think those are the shoulds. And I see another question came in Q&A. My handbook has a slew of definitions, like pages of them. Is that necessary? I don't know because I'm not sure what they are, assuming they're not industry specific, like bloodborne pathogens and BPPs and all the other LMNOP kind of acronyms. I kind of see that. So I think maybe they're not necessary. You could refer the person to HR for more information. You could have a glossary of terms. I've never seen that in a handbook. I'll give you an example. What I see in a lot of um, kind of employee classification, exempt or non-exempt. I think that can be a very short policy. If you're exempt, this is what it means. You're not eligible for overtime. If you're exempt, this is what it means. But your question reminds me, I see some policies where they go through the whole definition of exempt versus non-exempt. Here are the factors. And we might be able, even if you're exempt, we might be able to deduct your pay except in these 6 exceptions, and they list them all out. The intent is lovely and wonderful. I understand. I think that's great. We want to make sure you're fully informed. That's going to take 3 pages. So I think, depending on what they are, a lot of the definitions might be able to come out.
Yeah, where I've seen actually a glossary be pretty popular, particularly is with tech companies, where it'll be like a glossary of words specific to their culture, you know. But what I'm assuming is whoever's written this, it's more maybe technical definitions or like legal definitions to things.
And that person shared in Q&A, I think maybe with regard to the wage and hour, they said that's exactly one of them. So, so
Yeah,
yeah, there you go. Yeah,
yeah,
they did good.
yeah.
Family medical leave is another one. We do have to follow the Department of Labor sample. And then I see some policies that go way into here's all the various definitions of a serious health condition. And that's, again, lovely. You want folks to know, but it's so voluminous.
Mhm.
I think you can just refer them to HR for more information.
Yeah, I agree. Or maybe if it was like a digital copy of a handbook, you could have it hyperlink to a different part of your intranet or something like that.
That's great. Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. All right. So to continue, oops, there we go. We'll start with this one. Should we have different handbooks for different employees, or should it be an all-in-one? And I would say too, maybe even not different employees, but different locations too, Christine.
Yeah. So the different locations, I think, um, again, I try to avoid the word should. I prefer to have just the one core handbook for everybody, regardless of where you are. Here's what we offer and what we expect, and then the addenda in the back. If you happen to work in any of the following states, here's some additional information that's different from what's in the core handbook. For more information, CHR. Different employees, I see federal contractors. A question was how about for SCA, Service Contract Act employees? Should we have a separate handbook for them, or just employees working on different contracts? I've seen in some industries, like some employees might, in manufacturing, the employees that work at the plant versus those who work in corporate operations. You could, but again, I think it's more one administrative burden, right? If you have two or three different handbooks, every time you edit a policy, you're going to have to, assuming it's similar but different in the three versions, now we're going to have to make three updates instead of
Mhm.
one. Also, for the employees, now if I'm an employee, does my handbook look like your handbook and it has more information or less information? Or do I need to use two? I think just for everybody, it's easier to have one for everybody with some addenda on it.
Yeah, I imagine that version control would be a total nightmare if you had multiple. Okay, great. Now, you kind of talked about this a little bit, whether we should have forms or procedures in there. Um,
Yeah,
Kind of got your
yeah.
thoughts on that.
In the handbook, I would say no. So just to recap, handbook, I'm thinking is what we offer, what we expect.
Mhm.
How we go about doing those things for me goes in the procedure manual that has, and here are sample forms to file express a concern or file a complaint of harassment, to get reimbursed for your expenses, to fill out your timesheet and submit it, to apply for family medical leave, to file for workers' comp, all those sorts of things.
Yeah. How should it be distributed?
Which I think maybe goes to a question or comment that you posed in the beginning, Jocelyn. Um, so how whatever works best for you. And again, I love electronic. If you can have a PDF that goes out to everybody, everybody has access to it. One sometimes I get the question related to distributed, but then can the person download it? Pros and cons to that. I want everybody to be able to access it, to flip through it. I love the, Jocelyn, you mentioned again the hyperlinks to more information on it, like a shared directory. All that's great. Could they download a copy? I like it, especially maybe they travel a lot, but then they can still get it from the internet. What makes me nervous about downloading it is, as far as I'm concerned, that's a proprietary document. It belongs to you. You created it. It's your handbook, meaning the employers. And I don't want an employee to take your handbook somewhere else. Um, I think it stays with the employer. So that's if you haven't thought about whether they can download it or not. I'm not saying good or bad or right or wrong. Just think about whether that's something that you want to permit or not. And then again, for employees that work in the field and don't have access to the internet during their working hours, then I would distribute the handbook to those folks in hard copy.
Yeah, I'd say too that if they have an opportunity to download, what might happen is as these laws are constantly changing, and we'll see in the demo that Sarah does later, our handbook builder is constantly updating your handbook as the laws change real time. So they download it, they could have a stale version of policy and just be completely unaware.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a good point.
yeah. Sorry, did a question come through?
It did. How often should a handbook be signed or acknowledged? Is there a best practice like every 3 to 5 years? So, my answer to that would be I would only expect or request one acknowledgement for each version of the handbook. So, if we don't update it for 3 years, I wouldn't ask for another acknowledgement from the same employee within that period of time. So I would only ask for one acknowledgement for each subsequent edition of the handbook. If that wasn't your question, maybe resend it and I'll try again or we'll try again. Ah,
Okay, how do we confirm each employee read it?
so there you go. So kind of related. So I'm not sure we can confirm that they actually read it, but I like, so we all know we use an acknowledgement of receipt generally. I like the acknowledgement of receipt to say at least three and sometimes four things, and this depends on your procedure. So I like it to say, I've received a copy of the handbook, I've read a copy of the handbook, I understand the handbook, and if I don't, I'll ask HR any questions and I'll abide by it.
Hmm.
So I like all four of those. Um, that might not work if you're, so I see some employers, that's how they do it. Here's the handbook. You have 30 days. At the end of 30 days, we want your acknowledgement of receipt and we want you to acknowledge that you've read it. Others I see issue the handbook. I want your acknowledgement of receipt today that you got it. So in that, either one's fine. And in the latter instance, if you want the acknowledgement like the same day you give them the handbook, then I think it's you want to say something like, I've received it. I will read it. If I have any questions, I will contact HR. My fourth one I might toss out because I don't know how I can ask the employee to agree that you will abide by the policies if you haven't read them yet. So that's why I kind of like give it to them, give them some time, reasonable period of time to read the whole thing. And then I want to include that fourth question and I will abide by them.
Mhm.
I actually, when I was in HR, had an employee file a grievance, and that was his argument. He didn't ultimately win, but I thought, dang, what a crafty argument. Because he said, yeah, I got it. I signed the acknowledgement. I read it. I understood it. Never told you I was going to abide by it. It's like, oh, that was a really good argument. So we changed the acknowledgement of receipt after that. So I gave him a gold star for creativity. Another question came in, Jocelyn or Sarah, I think this is for you. If you're utilizing Virtual Handbook Builder, would we need to send it out again every update for an acknowledgement?
So what you can do instead of sending the entire handbook out is just sending that one individual policy out for e-signature to the affected employees. So like for example, Massachusetts, effective, I think November 21st, you need a new sick leave policy because pregnancy loss is now included as a reason for taking sick leave. Instead of sending out the entire handbook all over again, you can just go to our resources section, find that policy, and then send it out for e-signature to any employees in Massachusetts.
That's excellent to know. Just for me, that question came up in yesterday's webcast as well. So thank you. I learned that. Thank you.
Yep. um, yeah, and how often it should be updated. It's funny because now with having the tech that we have, to me, I'm like all the time, right? But I'd love to hear what you think, Christine.
Yeah, same. Generally speaking, I would say if you can do it annually, that's great. Once it's about 18 months old, I get nervous because something at the federal level has likely changed, and definitely things at the state and local level have changed. And that's the beauty of, I think, these automated systems is they're doing the constant search. You know, we human beings don't really have the time to do that. And so you kind of have to schedule it quarterly or 6 months or once a year. If you have a system that will automatically do that search for you, then there you go. It's done.
Yep. Great. Well, thank you. This was really helpful, Christine. I wanted to tack on to this a little bit by, segueing over into tech a little bit and how you can leverage technology to help you with the creation or maintenance of your handbook and the things to think about, right? When we think about how tech can help, we're thinking about editable templates, collaborative communication between you and other members of your HR or legal team, e-signature capabilities, automated updates, branding capabilities, how easy it is to use, and then upload functionality. As an HR practitioner, one of the things that I kind of noticed was that there were a lot of employee handbook builders that didn't allow you to upload an existing handbook. So you were kind of, if you were going to use a handbook builder, you were kind of forced to create one from scratch all over again. So, can you find a tool that allows you to upload an existing handbook? In our case, ours will analyze what policies are missing based on factors like the size of your organization and the work jurisdictions of your employees. And it will then provide recommended policy templates for you to incorporate real time so you have this compliant handbook. But you'll want to check and see, what type of functionality is available to in the tools that you're looking at. So something to think about for sure. As I was putting this together, I was thinking like, wow, this is kind of like Google Doc and Slack and DocuSign and Canva and Dropbox, like all in one. Can we find a tool that can do all of it? Any other questions that have come through that we can address?
Yeah, there are a couple. One is, can we have some advice for how to best deal with updates when your staff are hands-on and don't have company email? It's not easy to get signatures from 300 people every time you want an update. So I think that came in, Sarah, before you described kind of how that works. And so hopefully, I think you answered that. And the person who sent that question, let us know if that was not an
Well,
answer.
I think it goes beyond that. If they don't have company email, they're not getting those e-signature requests. So what I might recommend doing is establishing like a monthly or a quarterly cadence where you have your line managers provide a copy of those policies to your employees and have them get acknowledgement from them. That's probably the most seamless way. That's how I would do it, but I don't know, Christine, if you have any other ideas.
No, thanks for that. You're exactly right. I'm thinking that the email is coming to the HR person, and you're right. But then how do we? So yes, I agree. Somehow you reach out to those employees. So let's say we don't have weekly team meetings, but we have monthly team meetings, or as soon, I think the most important part is getting notice, not necessarily the acknowledgement, but can you show that you promptly notified the employee that there was a change and told them that they were expected to review it? And then maybe once a month or quarterly, we have a team meeting that says, okay, I need you to sign off that you've reviewed the updates in the last month or the last quarter. So yeah, I
Hmm.
think put those together and that would work.
Yeah, I think
Um,
it also depends on like um, really how much flexibility you have from a technology perspective. Like if there's a software that you use where they're punching in, for example, is there a way to show them like, hey, there's a policy update here, or please see your manager about a policy update, or maybe if everybody's punching into the same time clock on the board right on top, you can see, new update. And then their managers can just let them know in a team huddle, hey, here's a new policy. There are a few different ways of communicating the information. I think it's just a little harder getting the affirmation, right, that it's been received. That's the tricky part.
Yeah. And so I think notice is number one. So long as you can demonstrate that you sent a notice, however you did that to the folks out in the field, and then the
Mhm.
acknowledgement is hopefully a good follow up.
Is it
Looks like
okay, Christine, to send to their personal emails?
that makes me uncomfortable only because, oh, they don't have company email. So, yes, I think when they're hired, I'm guessing you probably asked them a question somewhere along the way. What's the best way to reach you? Like, what's your contact information? Not emergency contact, but your contact. So, if they provided a personal email for business purposes, then yeah, I think that would be absolutely fine. Yep. Looks like two more questions. There was the one, but Justin, I think you addressed that. Somebody said, how do I remove the states,
Mhm.
if I was using the builder? But that sounds like that capability is available. And if they need more information, they can reach out to Virtual HR. Another question for clarity, is it okay to have a company handbook and then an entirely different state handbook? We operate in almost every state, so our state level gets pretty deep. I think the answer is absolutely yes. And Sarah, I appreciate your demonstration because I learned you could do just the federal handbook, you could do federal and state, and you can do federal separate from and have separate state or states handbook, one handbook that covers multiple states. So I think my answer to that is absolutely yes. Am I correct that they can build that through Virgil HR?
Yes, yeah, and especially too for the state-specific handbook, you've got the ability to do your combined handbooks if you want all 50 states just in your state addenda handbook, um, or potentially just having like your Alabama handbook separate from your Arizona handbook, and then having kind of all 50 of them in there.
Somebody said, well, let me go up to the first one. Handbook upload. Does the system suggest optional policies that are not mandated?
I'm sorry, does it show optional policies not mandated? Yes,
So
there are.
for the handbook
Mhm.
upload, if I upload it, does the
Yeah.
system suggest, oh, here's some other policies that aren't mandated but might be
Yes.
good to have?
It'll
Yes.
show you both, and you can filter between the two so you don't get overwhelmed because we have almost 1,000 policy templates in there. So it filters it out very nicely for you.
And someone's very proactive. They tried to log in the SHRM code and said it wasn't working. So just to repeat, it's 24 dash M as in Mary, W William, M as in Mary, N as in Nancy 3.
Okay. If it's not, thank you to the person who flagged it. I will check when we get off the call. And when we send the recording in the next few days, we will reconfirm the SHRM PDC code for you in that email.
Beautiful. That looks like all the Q&A.
All right, great. Well, Christine, thank you so much for joining us. Sarah, thank you for the demo. That was awesome. There are even some new features in there that I hadn't seen yet, so I was really excited about that. I really appreciate your time and everybody's time on the call today, and we look forward to any other questions that you might have. So if you are interested in learning more, you have my contact information here. Please feel free to reach out to me directly. Happy to go through not just the employee handbook builder that we have, but the full compliance suite. So reach out with any questions. And I hope everybody has an awesome Thanksgiving week.
Have a warm and wonderful holiday. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Take care.